Welcome, beautiful people of all ages, shapes, and colors, to another episode of the Hit Your Freezers podcast, where we encourage you to stick to the basics. I'm one of your co-hosts, TV, aka TV on Basketball, alongside my co-host Jay, aka the Knockdown Jay. How's it going, my guy?
TV is going excellent. We took a little mini break in between the offseason kicking off, but that means we have a ton of news to get into. TV. It's a ton of NBA basketball, and the NBA season is supposed to be over. We thought it was going to be uneventful. TV. It's been more than we could have possibly imagined.
100%. And I don't say this like before many episodes. Strap in, because you're gonna have to be here for a minute, because we're gonna be talking about free agency. We're gonna be talking about the trades, because there's been some crazy trades that happened since the last episode. Of course, we're gonna be doing the draft and the free agency as well, and then of course we're gonna be talking about some juicy trade rumors that are still in the works that could still happen. Honestly, it could happen midway through this podcast. It could be before we even release it tomorrow. These feel like they're that imminent, and there's just a lot of stuff to go to. So be ready for a great episode and a great way to start off the NBA offseason. But before we get into that, we do have to plug our socials. Remember to follow our personal TikTok and our personal social medias at TV on Basketball, at the Knockdown J. You can find those links in the description below. In terms of the Hit Your Free Throws podcast, TikTok, Instagram for the best daily NBA content. We're going to be back on that. Just be ready for your home pages, all that good stuff, to be flooded with our stuff, because we're going to be going off this off season, no pun intended. In terms of the YouTube, remember to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you will not miss an episode. And if you're listening on any podcast network, Spotify or Apple, leave a review, subscribe, all that good stuff. That would really help us out. We really do appreciate all of you. Jay, are you ready to get into some NBA offseason talk?
Yeah, man, we got a lot to cover.
We do have a lot to cover, and we are going to start off with the trades, man. There have been some crazy trades happening in this offseason, and we're going to start off with the big one. We had a massive three-team trade over here between the Boston Celtics, the Memphis Grizzlies, and the Washington Wizards, in a trade that sent Kristaps Porzingis and the draft rights to Marcus Sasser to the Boston Celtics. The Wizards received Tyus Jones, Danilo Gallinari, Mike Muscala, and the draft rights to Julian Phillips. The Grizzlies received Marcus Smart as part of this trade, they received Marcus Smart as part of this three-team trade. The way we're going to do this is we're going to be grading each of the teams that were involved in the trade. Jay, what are you going to give a grade for? Let's go for each of these teams. Like, how do you want to give a grade for each of them?
So I think the obvious and most important team out of this trade was the Boston Celtics acquiring Kristaps Porzingis, and I gotta give that acquisition an A minus, because I think that although I would love to give it a straight A, there's even a part of me that wants to give it a B plus, because the biggest question mark is going to be, how does this team respond after losing a guy that's been considered as the heart and soul of the squad? Marcus Smart is no ordinary Celtic. This is a guy that, when you talk about what he's done in terms of ingraining a hard-nosed culture in the development of this Boston Celtics team, this young squad that's kind of improved every single year, he might not be the best player on the team, but he embodies a lot of what their core values are. So to see him shipped out and moved over to the Memphis Grizzlies, where I think he will be very helpful in a lot of different ways, that could be something that could be really impactful in the locker room. But if we're talking about the actual on the floor fit, this is what really carries this trade for the Celtics, because there's two things that's very important. The first one is Al Horford is getting up there in age. So this idea of playing Al Horford next to Rob Williams, or him being able to get significant minutes in the playoffs behind Robert Williams, that's not something that the Celtics can continue to rely on season in and season out. We've even seen just last postseason, Al Horford was starting to kind of get a little gassed. The age was starting to catch up to him, and it was starting to cost him. That's thrown on top of the fact that Robert Williams, after suffering the injuries the season before, this past season, Robert Williams, we didn't feel his impact the same way. TV, me and you had a ton of different conversations about how dangerous what Robert Williams was, and could have been even more effective in that series against the Golden State Warriors in the championship round had he been more up to snuff. But now you get a guy in Kristaps Porzingis who provides floor spacing, who provides another secondary rim defender that gives you a different wrinkle to maybe be able to play five out now. It gives the Boston Celtics I think it gives them a little bit of a different look that we've kind of always wanted from the Celtics, but we've never seen them bold enough to do. TV, a good way to phrase this is, let's go down the list of all the different guys that back when Danny Ainge had a million draft picks and had the opportunity to go after superstars, there were so many different ways they could have shook up the room, right? Jimmy Butler,
Yeah.
Kawhi Leonard, Brandon Ingram, Kevin Durant, Paul George. There's a handful of different guys that when you talk about the war chest of draft assets they had and all the different avenues in order to really shake up their roster, it was coulda, woulda, shoulda, because they saw the opportunity but never seized it. This feels like a little bit of a watered down version of a lot of those other potential superstar trades, but I think this is a very significant swing. And with the way that the Boston Celtics went out against the Miami Heat in this past postseason, I think it was a much needed shakeup. The hope is that the on the floor production makes up significantly for what was lost in the locker room.
Yeah, 100%. I think, I really do like this move for the Boston Celtics. If you're gonna lose Marcus Smart, and I think we've seen Danny Ainge do this in the past, where he sees kind of a small decline, like a decline coming for one of his key pieces. Not even Danny Ainge, Brad Stevens. He sees like a decline coming in one of his pieces, whether it's Isaiah Thomas, whether it's Avery Bradley, whether it's at this point now Marcus Smart, and he jumps the gun. He sees it before it's coming, try to get the max value out of it. No difference to Marcus Smart. The difference is Marcus Smart has been the longest tenured player, and he is like beloved by the fans, and just like he's, like you mentioned, the heart and soul of the team. But getting Kristaps Porzingis, you need to fill a hole in the front court. Sure, there's still Robert Williams. Sure, there's still Al Horford, but he's clearly the most talented of the three, and he provides something. Um, and on the defensive end, being one of like a very good shot blocker, as well as someone who can provide on the offensive end, be that third scoring option. He is a great fit for the team. I have to agree with you though. I'm not going to give it an A. I think it's an A minus. I still think like there's like a lot of question marks, especially like injury wise in that front court. Like you mentioned, Robert Williams clearly did not have the same effect that he did this season compared to last season. There's always been a flip flop like whether he should be getting more minutes or not, but he just feels like he's been like inconsistent, especially a lot this year. Maybe it's because of the injury. Al Horford is getting up in there in age. You just need to have some good backup for him. And they're able to get Kristaps Porzingis not only to sign in on this year for this contract. He signed a 2-year, $60 million extension. So it came with another 2 years. So it feels like the trade was more worth it for the Boston Celtics. So yes, I'm gonna give it an A minus. I think obviously with the whole the whole situation with this trade, they were gonna trade him. They're gonna trade Brogdon instead. He was supposed to go to the Clippers. That whole mess. Obviously, they would have rather got rid of Brogdon instead of Smart. But if you're trying to get someone like Kristaps Porzingis, someone who can literally be kind of a big difference maker, especially in the playoffs, someone who could become that legitimate third scoring option that they've been looking for, then it was a good trade. I just hated it came into like they had to give up Smart because of it. That's why it probably shouldn't have been higher. Because if they gave up Brogdon, I would probably give it a higher grade. But they had to give up Marcus Smart, which is unfortunate. Jay, how are you grading this from Memphis' side?
Memphis, I'm gonna give them more of like a B. I think for Memphis, I mean, the biggest part for them, right, is the Marcus Smart acquisition. And again, we talked about this off camera, and this is something that I just kind of noted as maybe not necessarily important for the Memphis Grizzlies, but just something to keep tabs on. And it's the idea that I think that they overcompensated for the Ja Morant situation in their backcourt. There was basically all of their acquisitions slash signings this entire offseason so far have all been at the guard position, right? The big time rookie scale extension for Desmond Bane, much deserved, by the way. Very hefty number,
Yes,
but
it is.
much deserved, by the way. Bringing in Marcus Smart, and then of course bringing in Derrick Rose. I thought it was just really interesting how much they doubled down on the Marcus Smart acquisition was the first of what then they would double down on with Derrick Rose in terms of not only being able to address the depth at the point guard position, especially after moving off of Tyus, but I think also specifically the kind of guys that they brought in at the point guard position. I think they're not just trying to cover up the point guard spot in terms of the actual minutes that these guys play. I think there's also a specific attitude that they want from a veteran point guard or a handful of veteran point guards through Rose and Smart that hopefully rubs off on a Ja Morant who will be missing 25 games this upcoming season and is going to need some real image reshaping, so to speak.
Yes.
And I think that in a really great way, although this may not, come to fruition initially, I think that in a really great way, these are two really good guys to be able to bring that to the forefront. Because again, Marcus Smart is a culture establisher. Say what you want about him being a shot chucker, say whatever you want about the fact that he can be a very dangerous turnover guy, even the fact that you can say his emotions get the best of him on the floor sometimes. But he's a guy that plays with a lot of patience, with a lot of passion. He holds guys accountable, and he's big time in terms of being a legitimate like leader at that spot. And then Derrick Rose, listen to any NBA player who's ever played with him. I was just listening to Julius Randle on the podcast with Paul George recently,
Yeah.
and he mentioned like when Derrick Rose speaks, it doesn't matter who you are, you listen. And look, TV, we joked about this off camera. Derrick Rose is the guy that he walked so that Ja Morant could run, man.
Yeah.
So if Derrick Rose is giving Ja Morant game, if Ja Morant is smart, this is the perfect guy from a mentor perspective to not only learn from in terms of your game, but in terms of how you carry yourself. So I think there's a lot of different ways where Memphis really addressed some of the big elephants in the room. I'm a little worried they may have overstated a little bit because once John Morant comes back, getting rotational minutes will be kind of a little bit more wonky at that point. But if you're looking at this specifically for what they provide off the floor, there's a lot of floor raising with some of these signings, and especially Marcus Smart being the biggest one.
Yeah, 100%. I love this trade for the Memphis Grizzlies. I absolutely love it. And I'm giving it an A, mostly because of that locker room reason. Marcus Smart, firstly, he's the perfect guy to have there for like 25 games. John Morant's not going to be there. Absolutely perfect. And when John Morant comes back, Marcus Smart's not going to complain about his role. Either way, whether he comes back off the bench or not, or if he ends up still starting, he's going to finish games for this Memphis Grizzlies team 100%, especially now that Dillon Brooks is no longer there. They found a Dillon Brooks replacement and a better Dillon Brooks and Marcus Smart for sure. What Marcus Smart does, and like you mentioned, he is a culture setter, a culture changer. You had Steven Adams there. Now you mix that in with Marcus Smart. They're really going to get on these guys. They have a bunch of these young guys. They just re-signed Desmond Bain. They still have Jaren Jackson Jr. out over there. Of course, a bunch of the young guys that they still have in rotation, Xavier Tillman, Santi Aldama, all those different guys as well. Zaire Williams, I have to mention him as well. But Marcus Smart will be there, and he's not only going to help them long term. Like he's a great player for them on the court. He's going to help them for these young guys and then having an influence on them off the court, along with the Derrick Rose signing, which again I am a big fan of that as well. And honestly, for the stuff they gave up, it was perfect. Tyus Jones, he wanted an extension. He wanted to be a full-time starter, and that's just not possible in Memphis. So shipping him out to Washington, someone who was definitely going to leave anyway, and getting some might say an upgrade in Marcus Smart, I'd consider it an upgrade for just basically giving away someone who was frustrated with the position with the role he has on the team. I think it was absolutely perfect. I have to 100% give the Grizzlies an A for this trade.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think if we're going to transition to the Washington Wizards, you
Sure.
talking about Tyus Jones. I mean, he's probably the biggest acquisition in terms of what they acquired.
Yeah.
And in terms of a grade, it's tough because you're the team that kind of just played middleman to make this all work again.
Yes.
And you kind of like they were kind of the one team that was kind of going to facilitate things all along.
Yeah.
Um, but that's also not super true because the Clippers were in the mix. So they were kind of the middleman that had to make this all work. But getting Tyus Jones, I think, was huge. You got to talk about what the Washington Wizards are looking to try to do moving forward, and that's trying to figure out a way to just simply reset. Something that the Wizards have never truly thought about until just now.
Yeah.
The proof is in the pudding. They've never put themselves in a position to really sit down and say, let's reflect on the roster that we want to have and how we can establish that with some of the guys that we already have in front of us. They've always been on go. It's always been one of those things where they seem to always look forward without necessarily reflecting on what it is that's actually in front of them. I think this is a perfect pickup with them because they get a steady hand. Obviously, they ended up picking Jordan Poole up later. We'll talk about that with the Chris Paul trade. But
Yeah.
being able to pick up Jordan Poole, I think, was big time. I mean, being able to pick up Tyus Jones was big time when later on acquiring Jordan Poole. I think that backcourt can be really big in terms of just what they'll be able to do from a dynamic standpoint. They'll be fun to watch offensively. Won't be able to guard a part car. That's the
Yeah.
tough part. But I think the other thing is Bilal Coulibaly is gonna be a guy that I think is gonna be brought along really slowly. He's a raw project and he's gonna need some time to really kind of figure himself out. I think Tyus is like the perfect when you think of perfect backup point guard, you think of Tyus Jones. So I think when you think of filling in a role while you wait for your younger guard to kind of fill himself out, Tyus Jones is a perfect placeholder for that as well. So I think that he's a guy that's going to really come along really strong in terms of making this team watchable, helping Coulibaly come along very nicely in year one. And at the end of the day, they kind of just need a steady hand to make all this work. Kyle Kuzma and Jordan Poole are getting all the shots. We already know that. But
Yeah.
we need somebody to kind of make this whole thing make sense, and Tyus Jones actually is perfect at that.
Yeah, 100%. I 100% agree with you there. I have to give this grade for the Washington Wizards a B plus. They gave up Kristaps Porzingis. Honestly, Kristaps could have just left for nothing and just left the Wizards completely in the dust. They were fortunate that he was able to agree to this trade, accept his player option, get the extension there with the Boston Celtics, and they got a solid piece in Tyus Jones. I mean, like I mentioned, he was like frustrated with the Memphis Grizzlies in the role that he had. He's been wanting to be a starter. Well, here's your opportunity. You're going to be the lead point guard for the Washington Wizards. Whether this is going to result in wins or some sort of victories, probably not. But he's playing for a contract. You know, he's going to be motivated. We're going to see some of the best some really good Tyus Jones basketball there in Washington. I think that he is going to be a good fit there. I'm going to give him a B plus for sure. I think he is a great fit there with the Washington Wizards. Him beside Jordan Poole and Kyle Kuzma, like you mentioned, both shot chuckers up there. He's going to be the guy to set up the plate. And if he needs to hit a shot, as seen with the Memphis Grizzlies, when he needs to step up, he is able to. So I think it's a good pickup for the Washington Wizards. And granted, you could have lost Kristaps Porzingis for nothing. At least you got something in return, as well as I think it was like draft rights to one of the rookies in the second round, which was not bad. Moving on to the next trade. CP3 got traded twice in the same week. And to a team I don't think anyone saw coming, CP3 is a Golden State Warrior. like what? Really? He is a Golden State Warrior, and he gets traded to here we go. Jordan Poole for Jordan Poole. So the Jordan Poole experiment is completely over. The 2030 protected first round pick, a second round pick, and then as confirmed later, Ryan Rollins was in the trade, and I think Patrick Baldwin Jr. as well. Jay, of course you got to start off with the Golden State Warriors here. What grade do you have to give for this trade for them?
Bro, so it's so weird because the fit is where things get kind of interesting because I would assume CP starts at the point guard, but then that means that Steph plays the two, Clay plays the three, Wig plays the four, Draymond plays the five,
It's a
Kevon
bit
Looney off
icky.
the bench.
Kind of icky. That looks kind of icky.
Yeah, like that. Like I don't know, but then if you say, "Oh, is Chris Paul coming off the bench?" Like I don't know. Chris Paul against second units could be pretty dangerous even at his older age. But is Chris Paul going to be interested in that? That's his own separate agenda. I also think that more than anything, you look at who they moved on from in the last year. James Wiseman is gone. Ryan Rollins is gone. Patrick Baldwin Jr. is gone. Mind you, those last two guys I just mentioned were literally in last year's draft class. Yeah. Now Jordan Poole is gone. Kuminga is still there, but there's some rumblings about him as well in terms of him potentially maybe even looking for a trade request. Not really sure how that's going to work out for him, but it's something that has been, floated out there, as well as Moses Moody. But something that should be indicated with this Jordan Poole trade is the simple fact that they understand that the two timeline thing just isn't gonna work.
It worked for 1 year. It worked for 1 year.
It worked for 1 year. It worked for 1 year TV, but I think it was one of those things where I think they were just on a different kind of plane than everybody else in the championship year. Steph Curry was playing at a totally different level. Klay Thompson really wasn't even himself most of that season. If you remember, we were worried about Golden State because it wasn't just the road woes. It was the fact that Jordan Poole wasn't playing like he was the season before. Klay Thompson looked like he was kind of like there was a little bit of rust still there from being out for 2 seasons. There was a lot to worry about with this Golden State Warriors team, and the youth kind of stepped up in a big way that wasn't translatable this past season. It was something that was a bit flash in the pan. Another thing that wasn't even really a big talking point was, at least until we got closer to the postseason, was how oddly the Iron Man that was Andrew Wiggins missed a lot of time. Now, granted, it wasn't even due to injury. That was the crazy part.
Personal reasons, yeah.
Yeah, but him missing a lot of time also really impacted their season. But nonetheless, the biggest thing was that I think they came to the conclusion that, especially with how expensive their roster is going to be, with bringing Draymond Green back 4 years, $100 million, I believe. Klay Thompson is next on the books as a guy that has to get paid next season.
Yeah.
Steph Curry's already got a maximum contract. This is a team that, if they're going to go all in and maximize what's left of Steph Curry, they were going to have to do anything and everything possible to truly commit to that grind. And trying to do the double timelines effect was only going to make things more difficult for them financially, and make it much more difficult for them in terms of on-floor production, because you were going to always be sitting there banking on the young guys to take that step. And we haven't seen it from Moses. And I personally think that Jonathan Kuminga last season in particular might not have been given the opportunity, because he oddly kind of fell out of the rotation a little bit, especially towards the middle portion of the year. So I think this was a real commitment to, let's get win now assets. And TV, here's something that I also have tinfoil hat theory here. So rock with me for a second. Is there a world where Chris Paul isn't on the Golden State Warriors for the sake of truly playing long term, being the entirety of next season with the Golden State Warriors? Okay, follow me here. If you remember what took place with the Kevin Durant sign and trade, Kevin Durant flipped a sign and trade because initially he could have signed to the Brooklyn Nets outright. The Brooklyn Nets were able to negotiate with Kevin Durant in order to be able to have him move to them in a sign and trade that would later send D'Angelo Russell to the Golden State Warriors. When we saw that initial transaction, similar to how we feel about the Chris Paul transaction, there's an initial reaction of, ew, this lineup sounds nasty. Ew, how does Chris Paul fit in this lineup? How does Chris Paul even play within this team? Ew, Chris Paul's 38. What's going on? And the same thing was with D'Angelo Russell. I'm not really sure. Outside of passing, does D'Angelo Russell really fit the Golden State Warrior play style? These are the type of things that came up. What ended up happening? D'Angelo Russell played relatively well for them, and it was later flipped for Andrew Wiggins, who ended up becoming a pivotal piece of the championship run that we ended up speaking of earlier. Under that circumstance, is there a world where Chris Paul was picked up as a bus stop on the way to flipping him again into somebody or a few somebodies that truly fit what it is that Golden State Warriors need in order to make yet another run?
I see what you mean. I definitely do see it. The difference is, when they got D'Angelo Russell, he was in his mid-20s. Chris Paul's freaking 38 years old. And then we saw what the market when the Suns were trying to get rid of him. It was so bad to the point they almost just flat out released the dude. So the fact that they brought him in here for the Golden State Warriors, this feels like a last hurrah, in my opinion. This feels like a last hurrah. Sure, Chris Paul might come off the bench, but he's 100% going to finish games with this Golden State Warrior team. Funnily enough, too, Draymond Green said in his latest podcast that he likes this move for the Warriors because he feels like that Chris Paul does a great job of empowering the young players. So he expects a big jump from Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody. That's something to look out for, too, as well. But at the end of the day, man, I think that, just going back to the idea of this whole grading thing, I think that the Warriors, they have to give them a C. I have to give them a C on this. Mostly because the fit is kind of wonky in my opinion, but I felt like it was something they had to do. If Jordan Poole was on this team, knowing Draymond Green's ego, if he was on this team and say if the Warriors gave him that 4-year, $100 million offer, he wasn't going to accept it because he's in his head. He's going to be like, why am I getting paid less than Jordan Poole? You see what happens like when I'm off the court compared to when he's off the court. I'm more valuable than he is. I think that the Jordan Poole trade was also just kind of like, you know what? We need Draymond back here. If we lose Draymond, like that's basically the end of our dynasty.
Cool. Good point.
Like we don't want any sort of these trouble and like having to pay Draymond more than 30 million. I think the minute they got rid of Jordan Poole, like Draymond Green was like, you know what? This contract long term, I'm cool with it. I think there's like something in the background there because Draymond Green's Draymond Green. He's petty like that. He wasn't gonna take like less money than what Jordan Poole is making. So the Warriors, even though I don't like the idea of trading their young future cornerstone piece for a 38-year-old um out of his prime point guard, is not great, but I think it had to be done. But on
I
the yeah, well, go ahead, go ahead.
I think you make a good point. I don't think I necessarily looked at it from that perspective that it's not necessarily about the fact that they acquired Chris Paul. It's more about the fact that they sent out Jordan Poole. I
Yeah,
think that's an interesting way to look at it. And I think that's a fair place to put it where I actually might want to give it like I was leaning more with you in terms of a C, but I might even want to give it a C plus because if you look at it from that perspective, the trade-off is essentially getting still a table setter in Chris Paul, but ensuring yourself that you will get Draymond Green, as opposed to standing pat, having Jordan Poole, who you're maybe a little unsure about his progression moving forward after last season, and potentially losing out on Draymond Green in the process. I think when you look at it that way, you almost have to give them a little bit of credence off of that because not only do you quote unquote keep the core going, but you do it in a way that still keeps them competitive. So although the fit is kind of nasty, there's a lot of other moving parts there that do actually make it kind of worthwhile at least.
yeah. I mean that punch freaking like ruined this whole like plan, this whole like trying to bridge the future and the present. Like that whole like punch that Draymond Green gave to Jordan Poole completely set a divide between the young players and the veterans in that team. Something had to give, and it had to be Jordan Poole. Yes, they got Chris Paul, who is still going to be an effective member of the team, but it says that you have to ship away your future because of that. And that future ended up in Washington. We've been talking about Washington already a lot on this podcast, but I have to give them an A for this trade. Giving away trading away Chris Paul and getting back Jordan Poole. Sure, I mean Jordan Poole, you have your questions about him, whether or not that he is gonna if he is that guy or not. But at the end of the day, with this new CBA, you have to spend 90% of your cap, or else they're gonna start finding you or deducting some like money from, or giving you some sort of penalty in terms of like not paying enough money to the players or whatever. Being able to do that, still being not competitive enough so that you can get top picks in the draft later on down the line, and get and like stay and still staying younger, getting a nice young piece, a 20-point per game scorer, Jordan Poole, I think is great. And getting like those extra like tertiary pieces around it, Patrick Baldwin Jr. and also Ryan Rollins as well. Getting super young, trading away a 38-year-old guy where, like I mentioned before, he was about to get released by the Phoenix Suns. Being able to flip that into the package they got, I think was fantastic business by the Washington Wizards, and I really like this trade for them. I'm giving them an A for sure.
I think I'm going to give them an A as well too because I think they were able to take a 38-year-old and basically infuse their team with a ton of youth, like you mentioned beforehand. Because you talk about it from the perspective of is Jordan Poole, is Patrick Baldwin Jr., who's still extremely raw but has a lot of upside. We got to remember in last year's draft, prior to the season starting, on big boards, Patrick Baldwin Jr. was projected as a top 10 talent before the year started. Now, obviously, once he played his season with Milwaukee, things got a little wonky, and
Yeah,
he ended up slipping down the boards significantly. Ryan Rollins was also a guy who was highly regarded coming out of I think it was San Diego, or it might have been I forget exactly, but he was viewed as a big time shooter, and he's a dude who I think with a little bit more real estate, those two guys are gonna get to see the floor a lot more than they saw in Golden State. That's gonna be huge for them because the biggest thing for the Wizards, and I mentioned it earlier, was this idea of just being able to like get an idea of what a youth movement looks like in Washington. They've never really been able to embrace that. Now you have Jordan Poole. Kyle Kuzma is on a respectable, it's a hefty contract. What was it, 4 years, 102?
yeah,
I
Not bad.
believe.
Not bad.
It's not a bad contract. The most important thing is it's a tradable contract. That's
Yes.
also something that's interesting. He can put up big numbers. He can play really nice next to Jordan Poole. They can be a pretty exciting offensive team with them two as a 1-2 punch. And Kyle Kuzma can be a really nice trade asset in a season or two. You put that alongside the fact that they got some draft capital in the exchange, along with the initial exchange we mentioned earlier when we talked about the big old Kristaps Porzingis trade. The Wizards were able to make themselves very flexible. And although they're not going to be a really good prospect team next year in terms of youth talent because they really didn't, make any noise in the draft itself,
Hmm.
um, I do think there's a lot to like about the way that the Wizards are moving now. So, yes, too little, too late. We all agree on that when it comes to
Yes.
Bradley Beal being moved. But I think that shout out to Michael Winger, man. He's come in and he hasn't wasted any time, and he's got them looking like they're gonna be on a competent track. It might take a while, but it should, considering how long it took for them to finally get to this point.
Yes, 100%. I'm just glad they're moving into that direction, and the way that they're able to, like, again, get Chris Paul in the Bradley Beal trade and being able to flip him for even more younger assets. Great business there for the Washington Wizards. I really like what they were able to do with that trade. One more trade happened, and Jay, let's start a parade. Let's let off the streamers. John Collins has finally been traded. 3 years of trade rumors, him been constantly on the trade block, and he gets traded for Rudy Gay in a second round pick. Yeah, that was a trade package for John Collins. The Utah Jazz basically got him for nothing. Jay, what? Let's start with Utah. They're the one who got the big piece in John Collins. What grade would you have to give them?
Straight is nasty, bro. Not gonna lie. Straight is nasty. Respectfully. Like, shout out to Utah for the big time fleece because again, the streets were talking. The streets were talking. Atlanta was on a mandate to make sure that they were clearing up, to make sure that they were good in terms of salary cap this year. They
Yeah,
were on a mandate to make sure that they were dropping.
because they also have to reach like that second level thing, right? Like the new. Yeah,
Because the second apron, they were already staring at it as
yeah,
a team that honestly ain't that good. It was
exactly.
understandable that being over the first apron was already asking for a lot. Being over for the second apron with this caliber of team,
Yeah,
I, as the owner, I don't blame them for not wanting to pay it either, brother. So,
exactly.
hey, I feel you on that one. So definitely pennies on the dollar by acquiring Rudy Gay, who I think there's a world where he doesn't even play for this team. If we're
I would
being
be
real,
surprised. I would be surprised if he's on their final roster. I'd be surprised.
yeah. I mean, I would really be so. I mean, even if he does make the final roster, I don't think he plays much.
Yeah,
I don't think he plays much for this team. So you're not even getting a rotational piece in exchange for John Collins. But here's the thing, dude. What the heck is going on in Utah? Walker Kessler, Laurie Markkinen, John Collins. You got Taylor Hendricks in the draft. Like,
on paper, it's looking kind of messy to be honest. But talent, there's a lot of talent there.
I mean, there's a ton of talent there, and I think there's a world where I think people were mentioning, hey, Laurie Markkinen's played the three before with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Put Laurie at the three, you put John Collins as a spacing four, and then you have a guy in Walker Kessler at the five. Look,
Possibly, yeah, I can
I'll
see it.
put it this way. If that is the lineup they run out, if these guys are engaged on defense, good luck in the paint. I'll say that much.
Yeah,
Because that's a lot of wingspan going on across those three positions for
yeah,
sure. And Walker Kessler is already a big time shot blocker as it is. And I think there's a real world where he can build on his rookie season and be even scarier defensively if he kind of is further empowered in the way that he was his rookie year. But I don't know, man. I'm still having a little bit of trepidations about where John Collins fits in. I think the biggest thing is his shooting stroke has to come back. That's the biggest thing that
yeah.
matters. That is, John Collins is a good player. He's a high flyer. He's a big time guy who I think can be dangerous at the four if he's healthy. That finger issue was making it very difficult for him last year to really be the guy that we know he's capable of. And it was making his shooting numbers look pretty dusty. And that was really hurting him because his ability to space the floor was really important, especially when you watched a handful of guys walk out the door from Atlanta the past postseason, on the past all season, including probably one of the most notable guys being Kevin Herter, who has a big time shooter from beyond the arc. So
Mhm.
John Collins has to get that 3-point stroke back. Otherwise, I mean, don't get me wrong. He's probably still better than Rudy Gay just as a lob threat. Just
Yeah.
as a lob threat alone, he's probably still a better player than Rudy Gay. But I think for us to ever truly believe in who John Collins is, and from an upside perspective, again, he's got to get that three ball back. I think Utah's going to empower him. It's going to be interesting to see where he plays and how often he plays in terms of that rotation. But look, Utah. Shout out to Will Hardy. He's going to have to get experimental. I think this is going to be one of those really interesting lineups where if he can get kind of jiggy with this one, we can see some really interesting rotations for this team.
Yeah, 100%. Again, giving away a second round pick and Rudy Gay for a potential, and I mean potential because John Collins back in 2019-20 was a 21-10 guy. He was a 21-10 guy, and you add that to your current Utah Jazz team, that could be pretty nasty. Not gonna lie. I'm gonna give them an A for this trade. I really do think so. Just because, again, with the whole new CBA, you have to reach the salary floor and all that. Getting someone like John Collins to even test out for the next couple of years is a good piece to have alongside Walker Kessler and Laurie Markkinen, just because he won't take up too much space. I mean, he will shoot the threes. I agree with you 100%. He does have to gain back that 3-point shooting back because from like 2019 to 2021, he was averaging like 40% from three. That was very, very key for the Atlanta Hawks' success. But he started dipping and dipping each and every year, so he really needs to gain that back. But for Rudy Gay and a second round pick, that's a chance that you should be willing to take, and it's a good move from the Utah Jazz perspective, 100%. For the Atlanta Hawks, we don't have to go too much for this. I'm giving them a D plus. They waited way too long for this to happen. We talked about the Wizards taking way too long to make that trade for Bradley Beal. I mentioned at the top, John Collins has been on the trade block for years, and I mean years. And what do you get in return with this whole new CBA thing? You get Rudy Gay in a second round pick. You're not going to tell me that from the last 2 or 3 years that there was not a better offer. You cannot tell me that for a fact. You had chances time in and time out. Even this past trade deadline, you probably had something better than this. And now they have to settle for this just because they have to cut salary. I mean, John Collins at this point has become had to be salary cutter, which is absolutely unfortunate for someone who used to be a 21-10 guy.
Yeah, man. John Collins and Julius Randle were like the running joke at the beginning of when we started this podcast months back. So the John Collins will never be traded in human life joke, and unfortunately finally comes to an end. But if you're Atlanta, bro, you've got to be looking at yourself and wondering, like, wow, like we probably passed on so many other potential offers that were much better than what we end up getting in the meantime. So for this one to be the case, that's a tough blow. I think that this only goes to show that Atlanta is, I mean, unless Trae Young takes some kind of significant step, I don't. I think this Atlanta team is unfortunately going to start to slowly fall down the totem pole. The Eastern Conference is a bulldozer, and Atlanta, they're staying stagnant, if not getting worse, while a lot of the teams around them are getting better. TV, I want to transition to something really quick because I feel like this is a cool way to kind of stay on trades but keep things current. So I think we're going to do
Hold on. I was gonna start off the exact same thing.
Go ahead, do it then. Go do it then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Grant Williams is on the Dallas Mavericks now. Trade announced by Sham Charania. It's a 3-team trade between the Spurs and the Celtics. The Celtics get 3 second-round picks. The Spurs get Reggie Bullock and an unprotected pick swap with the Dallas Mavericks in 2030. While the Mavs get Grant Williams, signing him to a 4-year, $53 million deal. Before we move on to the winners and losers, the free agency, Jay, good trade for the Dallas Mavericks. I mean, they're the only thing that really matters in this trade.
I think excellent trade, bro. I mean, you move over Reggie Bullock, he's a sketchy shooter at best. The defense is there. He's solid on the perimeter. Can kind of really only guard 2 positions, but the 3 ball is what kind of is his calling card. When he's on, and it makes him really big time as a 3-and-D wing. But when he's not hitting his shots, that boy is basically non-existent, and we don't really feel his presence at all. So you get a guy in Grant Williams, you know at bare minimum he's going to be able to guard. I think he can guard the 3 through 5. Honestly, I think I think there's a world where twos are there. It depends on the matchup, I think. But I think that he's physical enough where at least through the 3 through 5, he's got some versatility. You got to look at the rest of Dallas's offseason as well, man. I know we're going to get into winners and losers, and I will admit to you guys early on, Dallas isn't in our mix of teams that we had as winners or losers. But bringing in Seth Curry, remember, Seth Curry had some of his best seasons playing in a Dallas uniform. Getting Dante Exum, who was playing overseas for a little while, another big guard, a redemption chance for him on a 1-year deal. He's a guy who's gotten a ton of opportunity, but also was dealing with a lot of injuries. I think on a 1-year flyer, he could really play himself into good position. The return of Kyrie Irving is a big one. That was
Yeah.
their biggest play of the entire offseason. And then TV on top of that, man, the pairing of Grant Williams and Dwight Powell, now that they've gotten him back on a 3-year deal as well, defensively, they got some versatility in that front court. This could be a really good defensive team again, despite the fact that their backcourt still a little poquito. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
They also drafted Derek Lively as well, and I think they also made like another trade for a center. I'm completely blanking who they traded for at the center position as well. Oh,
They got Rashawn Holmes from the
Rashawn Holmes
Clippers.
is another nice energy piece off the bench as well. So they've been
Mhm.
making moves. They've been making moves. We're not going to mention them in the winners and losers, but they did make some like pretty good moves to Dallas Mavericks. Yeah, I like this trade. Getting Grant Williams, I think it's just someone who's like a versatile piece, like you mentioned, can guard 3 to 5, and is someone who, as seen in the playoffs, when he can get it on from three, he can hit some big, and I mean some big shots from three as well. He's a great piece for them. Someone who can finish games, someone who doesn't mind coming off the bench as well. I think it's going to be a really good piece, and I like the trade for them. The Celtics were probably going to lose him anyway. They weren't going to match like whatever big contract he was going to get from other teams. So being able to at least get some sort of draft capital, some like assets to maybe trade down the line was really good. And the Spurs, they get a pick swap. I mean, if Dallas isn't good by 2030, which you never know until then, that could be something very interesting, especially with one B on that team. So let's see. Let's see what happens. It's just funny that we got a trade mid podcast. I like that we included that as well.
Yeah.
But speaking of trades and free agency started, and man, there have been a lot of things going on. The way we're going to do this, there's way too many signings to go through, so we're going to be doing some winners and losers. I'm going to be introducing the winners. Jay's going to be introducing the losers, but of course, we're going to be talking about each and every one of them. And we're going to start off with the winners, because why start on a negative note? Let's start on a positive note. And the biggest winner, and I think both me and Jay can agree on this, has to be the Los Angeles Lakers. Bringing back D'Angelo Russell, bringing back Austin Reeves on a 4-year, $56 million deal, by the way. Absolute steal. Bringing back Rui Hachimura, getting Gabe Vincent, NBA finalist Gabe Vincent, and still having the team that they have right now, man, they they made some moves, and for a team that looked like they were gonna maybe like go all in for Kyrie and have like a basically the same situation as the Phoenix Suns, where they had basically just like 3 stars and like a bunch of other like veteran minimum guys around them, to turn that around and be able to make a competent roster with what they have. Big time free agency for the Los Angeles Lakers.
Yeah, I agree with you, TV. Another offseason where, hey man, to quote LeBron James, we gotta give them their damn respect.
Yeah.
I also think that we also specifically have to shout out Rob Pelinka once again. This was an
Yes.
easy offseason where everybody from the national media to probably Lakers fans themselves were looking at the Kyrie Irving Photoshop jerseys and thinking to themselves, oh, the Lakers are going to put a lot of pressure on the Dallas Mavericks because Kyrie Irving is going to want to play with LeBron James, and he's going to have an easy opportunity if the Lakers are willing to let a couple of guys walk in free agency. Specifically, I think they would have had to let Lonnie Walker, Austin Reeves, and Rui Hachimura walk in
Yeah.
order to bring in Kyrie Irving on the kind of contract that he was looking for, at least in terms of the kind of max they could offer him. That was the typical play. That was the stereotypical Lakers agenda kind of offseason they could have had. Instead, they did what's competent. They did what's going to put them in position long term to be the kind of team that they were last season, that shocked everybody, that put everybody in their place. Because we sat there for months, TV, and we got to take this one on the chin, me specifically, because I was giving them a lot of crap, even on my own podcast, that this was a team that we were worried about wasn't even going to make the play in tournament, TV. And they ended up making some serious noise, and they probably were. dare I say, the only team that really gave the Nuggets some burn on the way to the West, on the
Ah,
way to the NBA Finals out of the Western Conference teams.
I mean, it was a sweep, but it was a damn competitive sweep.
It was a sweep, yeah, and I agree. It was a sweep, but it was a damn competitive sweep. It might have been the most impactful set of games in terms of actual back and forth that we saw. Because I believe, I mean, hot take of its own, I believe the Lakers put up a better fight than Miami did, genuinely speaking. But
I mean,
no,
the Suns got 2 games, but I know what you mean. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I know what you mean, but it's still one of those things where I feel as though I think Denver kind of just was letting the gas pedal off.
Ah,
But yeah, it's one of those
got you,
things.
got you.
But nonetheless, when you look at the Lakers and you look at what they did across the board, right? Bringing back Austin Reeves, like you mentioned beforehand, was huge. And underrated thing about that, they got him back on the second day of free agency. So they didn't even have to get in a hurry to get this man back. So
Yeah.
that just showed where their position was. Being able to retain D'Angelo Russell while acquiring Gabe Vincent, I think was huge because I think Gabe Vincent is a perfect starting guard to play next to a guy like LeBron James. But I also think that getting D'Lo back is really good because he's going to be on a tradable contract. But say you play him in the rotation, D'Angelo Russell against second units is a pretty good upside to have on your team. I think that D'Angelo Russell is going to be a really good off the bench guy if he accepts that role. He's going to be a dude that I think could really kill it on second units. And look, I hate throwing this out there because I feel like we kind of throw this award out casually with a lot of guys when we see like talented dudes coming off the bench. But I think that D'Angelo Russell can make a run at six man of the year on this roster with the way that I think
Sweet.
he might be able to play. So there's a certain level of empowerment there where I think if Gabe Vincent gets to start, as I think he deservedly should, as well as Austin Reeves, D'Angelo Russell could be the third guard off the bench in rotation, and I think he could be a really effective piece offensively as just a scoring punch that can just go out there, be the primary initiator, get busy, get points, and kind of keep the ship afloat whenever AD and LeBron or any either of Gabe Vincent and or Austin Reeves come off the floor. There's a lot to like here. There's a lot to like about what the Lakers did this offseason.
Yeah, just great, great moves. I didn't even mention the Cam Reddish signing that they did, Jackson Hayes, who they brought in as well. They built some like really good things. Torian Prince on a 1 year deal as well, solid player for the Minnesota Timberwolves. They've just built their depth. And Jay, one of the biggest things that you listen on this podcast day in and day out is that teams who win with continuity, and they didn't let any of their key pieces go. The players that they brought in last year, they're bringing them in for a full training camp along with the experience they had with each other last year. They have continuity. They worked around the edges. The Lakers didn't panic. They didn't decide, you know what, let's go fully with the super team like they've done in the past. They were able to be a confident franchise, and like you mentioned, hands off. Let's go give Rob Pelinka his due. There was a lot of question marks with him before the trade deadline, especially with the move he did for Russell Westbrook back in the day. But trade deadline onwards, the best GM in the league so far. Like the best GM in the league from the trade deadline onwards, he's been absolutely fantastic. That's why the Lakers are a winner. Jay, move on to the first loser.
So for the first loser, I think the team that we have to go with is Portland, right?
Yeah.
Like, dude, this is tough. First of all, L mans but W mans because L mans because of the way that Damian Lillard conducted himself after this next point I'm about to make. But W mans because Damian Lillard single-handedly got Jeremy Grant paid this summer,
Bang.
boy.
Uh,
5 years, what
Bang.
was it, 160 million?
Yes. Yes.
I mean, he got that boy paid the bag because let's think about it. Realistically speaking, we're all smart here. There's no way in the world Portland's throwing Jeremy Grant this bag unless they believe that this is a move that will contribute to making Damian Lillard feel comfortable about his chances of being able to make a run at the postseason this upcoming year. And make him feel comfortable in general with wanting to stick with what the franchise is trying to do moving forward. Then Damian Lillard puts in the trade request. Now it makes everything look confusing. First of all, Jeremy Grant, their only signing of the offseason. The
Yes.
Scoot Henderson thing makes more sense now, thank goodness, with the whole Damian Lillard thing. We'll talk about it a little bit later in terms of some of the things that could take place with that. But now, thank goodness they went with their gut and decided to Henderson, because Lord behold, if they had decided to go a different route and go the Brandon Miller route, as you mentioned when we last were on this podcast, you mentioned that would have been the ultimate Portland Trailblazers thing to do, right? Take Brandon Miller, bring back Jeremy Grant, and guess what? We'll run it back as the team that's just, just going to continue to build up in this manner with 3-and-D wings next to Damian Lillard, and hopefully Brandon Miller is more than ready, right? This bank on where they can try to play both sides of it, where they can be young but still draft for the present as opposed to the future. But instead, Portland was at least smart enough to stick with their gut and go with the best player on the board, and they grabbed Scoot Henderson. But guess what? Now they have to figure out how the heck they're going to conduct they're going to conduct a Damian Lillard trade when the team that's on his list is Miami. The main team that's on his list at least is Miami, and the main contracts that come out of a Miami Heat trade are Tyler Hero, which is basically Anthony Simons, and Duncan Robinson, who I don't think they want.
They don't want Tyler Hero either, I don't think.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't think they want Tyler Hero either. But I think at least if they took Tyler Hero, they could find a way to flip him or flip Anthony Simons if need be, because he probably has a little bit more trade value. Duncan Robinson, that's probably tough pickings, even with the postseason that he just recently had. So with that being the case, they don't have a great trade structure for him moving forward. Now, granted, TV, and this is actually where I'll pass it to you. This is the question. We'll talk about this a little bit more when we really get to the Damian Lillard trade. But the real question to me, or for you, that I'm going to ask you is, this offseason can get way better for Portland if they do one thing. Think about Portland first.
Yes.
Because the easy thing to do is Damian Lillard is the best trailblazer, and he's the best trailblazer in our franchise's history. We're going to respect whatever his wishes are and try to send him to whatever team it is he desires. Or he's under significant cap construction, or he's under significant cap control in terms of contract equity, and you only get to trade Damian Lillard one time.
Yeah.
So, TV, this offseason can get much better if they go about this a certain way. If it were you, we'll get into the actual trade scenarios later, but if it were you, which route would you go being in the hot seat that is being the general manager of the Portland Trailblazers right now, where you have to choose whether you respect the wishes of arguably the best player in your franchise's history, or you go for whatever the best package is?
Well, it's different being someone who's like an outsider, not being part of Portland, right? It's super, super tough. But, I mean, there were reports saying that the Trailblazers are looking for on the best interest of the Portland Trailblazers, and there was like reports going about that. And Yusuf Nurkic just replied to the tweets with laughing emojis. He knows, I think, just as good as anyone else, that the Portland Trailblazers don't have the backbone for that. They're gonna abide by Damian Lillard's wishes and get a package which they could get something so much better. Let's be honest, they can get something so much better, and there's definitely some like trade options we can like maybe get into, maybe in this episode, maybe in another episode. But at the end of the day, there's whatever Miami Heat can give is just not going to be equitable value for Damian Lillard, mostly because they don't have the draft capital. The young talent they're going to give away is super redundant to the Portland Trailblazer team in general. I mean, like, they don't need another guard. They need some wings. They need like some bigs. None of that's going to happen when you trade Damian Lillard over there. That's why there's so much talk about a third team being involved. But even still, just jumping through all those hoops and stuff just to try and get equal value for Damian Lillard is just not going to be possible. If I'm the Portland Trailblazers manager, I'm 100% getting the best package for Damian Lillard. But they're too scared about the image. They don't want to ruin and like burn down this bridge of Damian Lillard, like in general, especially for the amount of years that he had to deal with the BS that was going on in Portland. They're gonna abide by Damian Lillard's wishes, but I'm not doing so. If I'm the Trailblazers GM, I'm not doing it.
I think you're right. I think that that's logically what's going to happen. If we had to pick what we think is going to happen versus what we think is right, I think I completely agree with you. But TV, let's take a step back for a second and let's go back to the Grant Williams trade. How many draft picks did they acquire in that exchange?
The Celtics got three second round picks.
Okay, so they got multiple second round picks. They also acquired draft capital in the midst of the Kristaps Porzingis trade, correct?
They got like 2 first round picks, yeah, surprisingly.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
Hey, yo.
You know what I mean? I mean, look.
If that's a trade scenario, I mean that could be nuclear right there. That could be nuclear.
Because at the end of the day, Malcolm Brogdon is going to be a guy who I believe expires soon. I'll double check that and make sure I'm not talking out my ass here. But Malcolm Brogdon, I think, is going to be a guy that is going to be expiring contract. If not this year, then I believe it would be next year. Yeah. So yeah, not this year, but it would be next year. So he's a guy who's slowly going to be on an expiring contract. That would be good for Portland's books. And then you talk about all the potential draft capital that they could also associate with that. They still have Derek White on the team. You would have Damian Lillard, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. You have Kristaps Porzingis, Rob Williams, and Al Horford. Danilo Gallinari is no longer on this team, I believe, even though that would have been super dope if they could have kept him around. Yeah. But they're a team that, I mean, first of all, Damian Lillard, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Kristaps Porzingis, Robert Williams is one of the craziest starting fives in the league instantaneously. Instantaneously, that team is just that starting five alone is crazy. But
it's the starting five.
I'm just saying, TV. I think that if you're Portland, I don't even know if the Celtics are the best potential option. But I'm just saying the Celtics seem to quietly be picking up a lot of draft capital over these last couple of exchanges that they've been going through in these sign and trade. They still got one more point guard. They've still got one more point guard to move off of. And no offense to the point guard market, but between point guards and centers, they're kind of like the easiest guys to pick up on either the veteran minimum or on the buyout market. Yeah. So in terms of this, you take your big swing to go after Damian Lillard with the draft capital you keep acquiring and maybe move Malcolm Brogdon as an expiring. I think you do it 10 times out of 10 if you're Boston. The question will be, again, like you mentioned, do the Portland Trailblazers have the balls to do it?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think Damian Lillard would mind going to Boston, knowing if they're not going to get rid of Jaylen Brown or any of those other guys, like any of the key pieces. I think Damian Lillard would be definitely open to that. But it seems like he's really sound Miami for sure. But I like the trade. I just don't think that. Is there any player on that team that is like at least from the Point Trailblazers perspective, that is more valuable than Tyler Hero they can get for them? Because like if anything, if they're gonna do the trade with the Celtics, it's gonna be for all draft capital. Because like,
probably not, but I think the redundancy of Tyler Hero makes him enough of a turnoff. Yeah. I think that makes you want to go after the draft capital because I think especially when you think about, we got to give them this much. Like if you really think about it, they've hit on the draft pretty frequently as of late. Like they've done pretty well. Shaedon Sharpe, now Scoot Henderson, Anthony Simons. I think they've done relatively well in terms of drafting. So I think if I'm them, I would want enough bites at the apple to really, if we're gonna do a hard reset, I think you would want as many bites at the apple as you could potentially get down the line. I think that would be a good setup.
Yeah, for sure. But again, if you're not going to go with Miami, I think that there still could be better options on around. We might have to go into the different trade packages, maybe in a different video or even like in a TikTok or something like that, just because there's probably some like other like wing players that could be there for Damian, that could be possible for Damian Lillard. But going back to the original point, the Blazers took an L this offseason.
Yeah. The Blazers, like I said, with their only move being Jeremy Grant, this puts them in a really tough spot in terms of what they're able to do moving forward. I don't think they're going to be making any more really significant acquisitions. And, I mean, it's just one of those – it's a tough situation for Portland, man, because you could tell that they were trying to make it work, but they just didn't have any real avenue to put themselves in a really good position, and now they have to pay the price.
100%. Let's get back on a positive note. The next one we're going to be discussing for the free agency winners and losers is the Indiana Pacers. And the Indiana Pacers some low key moves. They're looking like they're building something nice there in Indiana because they re-signed Tyrese Halliburton. Sure, it's 50+ million a year max. I mean, again, this is like it has to do with like him making All-Star appearances, this and that, so it can get up to $260 million. But they traded 2 second-round picks to get Obi Toppin, who feels like an absolute perfect fit for this team. And they still got that nice young roster around him. Miles Turner's still on the team if they still want to trade him. Jay, they look like winners just because like they made some like minor moves, but it's moves that will help them progress going forward.
I think the biggest thing is that they've just addressed a lot of the things that are going to make them better, right? Getting Obi Toppin. I mean, when you think about Obi Toppin as a high flyer, how he's able to produce in the half, I mean in the open floor, and you talk about the way that Tyrese Halliburton specifically wants to play as a dude who loves to be able to get out and run and play in transition. Obi Toppin fits like a glove on this team. Like he fits perfectly with what they want to do. Bruce Brown gives them a big time defender that can guard up and down the roster next to Tyrese Halliburton or next to Buddy Hield or next to Ben Mathurin for that matter. Like Bruce Brown is shown in multiple different spots, whether that be with the Brooklyn Nets or that being with the Denver Nuggets, that he has some flexibility in terms of where he can fit on the floor to make himself a viable option. And granted, he might have gotten, maybe a smidget overpaid, but he's on a 1+1, so he has a play. He has a chance. I think the second year is a team option. It might be a player option, but either way, the second year is one of them that ends up being an option. So there's still some flexibility within that. And either way, Bruce Brown is another guy who I think just kind of fits what they're trying to move towards that. A more like, up and down play style. And then I mean, just what they were able to do across the board with the draft as well. They just I think they're doubling down on defense because they know that they can score. I think they know with the
Yes.
pace they want to play at, they know they can score. So I think that by going the route that they've gone, Obi Toppin was more of a doubling down on the transition play, but Bruce Brown, who was it? What was it they did? They got Jarris Walker in
Jer-
the draft.
I think that, but I think he ended. Yeah, I think they got Jarris Walker. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was Jarris. I think it was Jarris Walker, and then of course they have Miles Turner to back him up. That's huge. I think it just what they have defensively. Like they TV, I think this offseason, if anything, maybe doesn't increase their playoff chances, but it definitely makes them like top three most fun teams to watch this year easily.
100%, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got the pieces there. The Bruce Brown signing was absolutely fantastic. I think he just slots right in wherever they want to play him. Funnily enough, I think Bruce Brown can play like positions 1 through 4. That's how freaking versatile he is as a player and how strong he is as a defender. Even though he's only 6'4", he can like play a PJ Tucker type role even at the 4 position. I just think that they've made some great moves. Again, the drafting of Jarris Walker is a great like piece as well. Giving up basically just 2 second-round picks for Obi Toppin was great. I think they're just making just some like nice moves around the edges and solidifying their future with Tyrese Halliburton and signing that 5-year contract. It just like really sets the direction. And now they've got like two sides of the coin. They got the offense there. They got the defense. I think they made some really good moves. And then again, like you mentioned, if you got League Pass, because you know that Indiana's not gonna get not many nationally televised games, but if you have League Pass, that's definitely a team that you want to be watching, and I think it's gonna be a really fun team to watch moving forward. Jay, next loser that you got?
I think, oh man, next loser. I think that the next team we gotta go with, I don't even want to get super crazy about it, but I think the next team that would probably be best. Go down this list again, double check to make sure I feel confident about it. I think we gotta go with the defending champion Denver Nuggets, man.
Yeah.
I gotta be honest. Didn't like their offseason at all. Denver Nuggets made me feel like they're gettable now. Like I understood that they didn't have a ton of cap flexibility as it was, but losing Bruce Brown, that's a tough hit. Losing Jeff Green, that's a tough hit. Having to bring back DeAndre Jordan, aka the Pom Pom Master, on the sidelines, I'm not feeling that one. Bringing back Reggie Jackson, who couldn't even get rotational minutes for you in the postseason last year. Not feeling that one. Justin Holiday. I feel like there's always a theory of what Justin Holiday can be as a rotational like 3-and-D wing that's supposed to be kind of like an easy glue guy for teams, but he never really ever shows out enough for you to feel his impact, regardless of what team he's on, whether it was Atlanta, the Mavericks, the Sacramento Kings, even. Like, it didn't no matter what team Justin Holiday's on, even Indiana for his time there, you just never really feel his presence, despite all of the attributes being of a guy who you think could be a really nice plug and play player. If he fits, great. But I don't know what the likelihood of that is. But maybe Jokic alone can bring the best out of him the way that Jokic has done with some other players, just in the last season or two. But I just think that as defending champions, they're going to enter the season, in terms of the regular season, they're still going to have a ton of equity there. They're still going to have one of the best starting fives in the league. But I think they're going to go, they're not going to have the same kind of injury luck they had this past year. I think we can expect that. They're not going to have the same injury luck that they had this past season. And I think, unlike last year, the warts they have, there's more of them now. There's more susceptibility to them now than last year. And maybe Jamal Murray takes another step. Maybe Jokic just continues to be a dog. Maybe Aaron Gordon continues to expand within his role without having Bruce Brown as another guy. Maybe Christian Brown steps up within his role in year 2. But we're going to have to see it, because otherwise, based on just what this offseason has looked like, they've taken a step back, and that makes them vulnerable in a Western Conference where, honestly, I still think it's anybody's game.
100%. They lost 2 rotation players who were in their finals rotation. That is going to be massive. The Denver Nuggets are still going to be great. I don't think anyone's going to be denying that. I think that just losing Bruce Brown and Jeff Green just leaves just those holes on your bench that I feel like they're kind of betting too much. I mean, we talked about this off pod, that they're kind of betting too much, again, on the young guys kind of like taking that next step. We're still waiting for Zeke Naji to take that next step as a player. They drafted Julian Strother and Hunter Tyson, especially Hunter Tyson. I've seen that Denver Nuggets fans are pretty high on him. But every so often, we saw what Christian Brown could do last year, and he was a good piece for them. But at the same time, like, betting on the fact that one of these young guys are going to take the next step or take that step up and join the rotation is a bit unrealistic. I think it's going to be hard enough to lose Bruce Brown, but to lose Jeff Green too, who was a key piece to that rotation, absolutely sucks. And then, that has to be a reason why they're a loser. They lost, 2 finals rotation pieces after coming off a championship. It was going to be tough either way.
Yeah, Denver definitely. We're going to have to see. We're going to
have to wait and see 100%. Going to the next winner. Look, say what you want about going all in, but if you're going to go all in, you got to commit to all in. The next winner we're going to talk about is the Phoenix Suns. They got Bradley Beal. But they traded him for. We talked about it. The Wizards got fleeced. The Wizards got absolutely fleeced, and that was because of their own doing, giving Bradley Beal a no trade clause. And the Suns took advantage, only giving away Chris Paul, someone who was gonna be released anyway, along with Landry Shamet and just a bunch of pick swaps. James Jones said it a couple years ago. He doesn't care about picks, and he fully showed that on display this offseason. They got Bradley Beal. They've went in on the all-in mentality, and whether you like it or not, they didn't have to give up that much for him, and that's what makes them a winner. Because if you're gonna if you're gonna commit to being this complete super team, and forget about and just get a bunch of veteran minimum guys around them, at least try to do it as best you can. And the Suns really got value out of all those pick swaps and second round picks that they could, and Bradley Beal is a freaking top 10 scorer in the league. It's a really nice piece to have on their team. They're definitely a winner here.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that the Phoenix Suns, we just were worried about how they're going to fill out their depth, right? And I think they just were able to attack that in a big time way. I think an unsung guy in all of this is Jordan Goodwin. I think Jordan Goodwin, big time on defense, he played really well in spurts for the Washington Wizards. He's going to be Jordan Goodwin is going to be a guy who I think, Jordan Goodwin is going to be a guy who I think could really give them some solid minutes. I think he could get some good rotational time, but you look across the board, for what they had available, granted, I don't think there's anybody on this list outside of maybe Eric Gordon and Yuta Watanabe that I figured was going to maybe be able to garner more than a minimum style contract. But TV, they've got I think they've got 7 or 8 guys on this team that shot 38+% from beyond the arc now. This team is gonna be firing. So And as they should be. I mean, there's going to be a ton of space to operate. Eric Gordon could be a second unit initiator on this team. We might be able to finally see Eric Gordon play meaningful basketball again.
For the first time in a while.
After, for a first time like you mentioned, for the first time in a really good time. Yuta Watanabe already is familiar with playing next to Kevin Durant. I think that he's a big time, like, just energy hustle guy, and the fact that he can knock the three down at a high clip is good. Damian Lee, I think, kind of falls into a similar lane as that. And then, at the center / power forward positions, Chimeze Metu, Drew Eubanks, Keita Bates, Diop, like, these are all guys that, like, I think just can really be some good innings eaters. And look, like, I don't know if they'll need to, but TV, they still got the DeAndre Ayton trade package just sitting in the back pocket if they feeling frisky.
Potential.
They feeling frisky.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, they did what they had to do. I mean, they, with the money they had in all the veteran minimum contracts that we knew that they were gonna have to sign, they did pretty well. I mean, Eric Gordon. What was funny was that he was almost put in the Kelly Oubre situation, like from the Warriors a couple years ago. If the Clippers decided to keep him in his $21 million contract, they would have probably had to pay like $90 million because of the freaking like tax rules they would have broke and stuff like that. So it was good that they got to let him go, and he ended up going to the Phoenix Suns, where, again, like you said, he's gonna have to play. He's gonna play some meaningful minutes. He's gonna be like 6th, 7th man on the bench over there. So they got, with the little money they had, they're able to do it, and they still have that DeAndre Ayton trade package in the back of their mind, in the back pocket. If they were to do that, they can even provide even more depth. So they got Bradley Beal. They got probably the most lethal scoring trio in the entire league, and they didn't have to give much to do it. So they 100% are winners here. Jay, moving on to the next loser.
The next loser, I think, is Houston.
Yeah.
Houston is a tough one, bro. And it's because I think that this salary floor thing, it really hit them hard, man. It really made them have to be active, because you put the salary floor aspect next to the fact that with their draft situation being kind of tied up for the next couple of seasons, they're going to have to start kind of aiming for win now moves. They definitely leaned into it, but it makes their team that much more confusing now. They gave Fred VanVleet the bag. Buddy's making more per year than Klay Thompson, Kyrie Irving. There's a handful of guys. I think, TV, what was the stat that you told me earlier? He's like 17.
For this upcoming season, he's gonna be the 17th highest paid player in the league.
Like, dude, no. Like, Fred VanVleet might not even be like the 17th best guard in the NBA. Like, there's a world where, like, in just the guard position alone, he's probably, like, if anything, he cracks the top 15 maybe at his own position.
Yeah, he cracks the top 15, but yeah, I don't think he's like a top 10 point guard anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, granted, I think it's 3 years, with the last year being a player option.
Team option.
So there's some flexibility there. But Dylan Brooks, 4 years, $80 million. I like that he brings you defense, but I don't know if he's the kind of guy with the mental to bring to this Houston Rockets team where everybody's still trying to figure themselves out. Jeff Green seems like a veteran guy to kind of like help kind of bring things together, but
that's fine.
He's gonna be
I'm good with that. Sorry, everything.
But the question is, does he get minutes? Like, these are different things that I think is important, because if he's getting minutes, this is a super young team. That means somebody's not getting minutes, and that's also tough for them. I also don't like that they had to miss out on a couple of guys in the midst of all of this, right? They had to give up on Ty Washington. They had to give up on Josh Christopher, Usman Garuba. These are guys they had to move off of in order to kind of make a lot of this stuff work in terms of their depth. And I still think there's questions. They just drafted one of the Thompson twins, and we thought coming out of the draft, oh man, him next to Jalen Green in the starting lineup is going to be insane. There's a world where I don't think he's going to start now, because there's no way you pay Fred VanVleet what you pay him and Fred doesn't start, right? So now, do you stunt? I believe it's was it Asar? Was it Asar that was drafted there?
I think so, yeah.
You don't want to stunt either way. You don't want to stunt the growth at the guard position as it is by bringing in all of this veteran depth.
Amen Thompson,
excuse me. So, it's just kind of tough, man. It's tough because they were already having a log jam in terms of their depth. And yes, I think it was definitely financially smarter to just throw a bag at a small finite amount of guys. In this case, it was really just Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks who they
Yeah.
threw the bag at. Jock Landale got a 4-year contract too, but whatever.
Yeah.
Like, it's probably better to do that than to be trying to split your contracts up and try to grab a bunch of guys with the kind of depth they have. But I like the Fred one. I like the Fred one a little bit because I think the mentorship he can have for the backcourt unit that Houston has is good. Dylan Brooks, on the other hand,
It's questionable.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, it's again. I mean, this whole CBA, and this is a whole thing we've been talking about the entire episode. The CBA is making these teams. Same thing with the Jazz when they trade for John Collins. They had to hit that salary floor. One of the teams that had like a bunch of cap space going into this offseason, they had to hit that salary floor, but they made a smart move, giving up very little assets to take a flyer on a guy like John Collins. The Houston Rockets, on the other hand, gave bags to someone who completely like downed his reputation after this playoffs in Dylan Brooks, and they made Fred VanVleet a top 20 paid player this upcoming season. Like it's just not a great look, but it's something they had to do, bro. It's something that they had to do, and at least it takes like they get clowned, the Houston Rockets, for being called an AAU team. Someone who was just like they just throw a bunch of these like really like good college guys together. I mean, this year's kind of the same. They brought in Ahmed Thompson. They got Cam Whitmore with the 20th pick. It's just keep building to that reputation. You got some guys in there with the Jeff Greens, Fred VanVleet that can kind of like calm down the locker room, which could be proved valuable. Is it $40 million a year valuable? Probably not. But at the same time, I think like they just were kind of like forced into a hole. Good thing it's not super long, but man, giving that money to like the type of points that they got, I mean, it's kind of looking rough. That's why we had to give the Rockets a loser here. But flipping to our last winner, Fred VanVleet is a freaking big winner here, man. Let's pop the champagne. 3 years, $130 million. That is insane money. And we talked about it for the episode. He's like a borderline top 50 player in this league. Borderline top 50. And he was able to get that big money. But I am going to flip it over to my Raptors, though. It's a winner for Fred VanVleet, but I think it's also a winner for the young guys in Toronto Raptors, most importantly Scotty Barnes. Because after this signing has happened, there have been reports saying that him and Fred VanVleet butted heads. Fred VanVleet was just not a fan with the way that the effort and the way that the young guys were carrying themselves, most specifically Scotty Barnes and Gary Trent Jr. So there was a lot of tension in that locker room, and Pascal Siakam had to be kind of the mediator in a lot of this. I think him moving away from the Raptors, yes, it sucked that the Raptors didn't get anything back when they could have traded him for something at the trade deadline, but they made some moves in getting Dennis Schroeder and also Jalen McDaniels to kind of make up for the cap space that they did open up when getting rid of Fred VanVleet. So I think that just gives a weight, provides a weight off the shoulders for someone like Scotty Barnes. Maybe now, I mean, Jay, you mentioned before the podcast, Point Scotty could be a real possibility coming up this upcoming season. And with the drafting of Gritty Dick, the best shooter in the draft, along with that team, the Raptors could be one of those teams to kind of keep an eye out on. But losing Fred VanVleet is tough for them, but they did some things well to kind of mitigate that. But Fred VanVleet, man, congrats to him. He got the absolute bag, and I mean, just a crazy amount of money.
Yeah, man, I think Fred's a winner. I think depending on which perspective you come from, I think because you're a Toronto Raptors optimist, it's a lot easier to look at this from a young guy's perspective and say, okay, there's a lot of empowerment around the pipeline, around the corner. So there's a lot to be happy about down the pipeline in terms of their young guys' development because of a lot of the internal stuff that was going on that was rumored to be involving Fred VanVleet. There's the other side that looks at it and says, well, you got OG Anunoby coming up next. You got Pascal Siakam situation going on. Gary Trent kind of reluctantly got re-signed, but is he a guy that could potentially still be moved? You guys still have a ton of different questions. So yes. I think there's a lot of different routes you can look at it. I agree. Fred VanVleet is walking around, looking like Scrooge McDuck and at the crib right now in terms of the bag he just received. But There's a lot. There's a lot still to do when it comes to Toronto because there's definitely still a lot of question marks, but I think there's some upside. I think there's
Yeah.
some light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak.
I'm just gonna say just mostly just freedom for Scotty Barnes for sure.
Yeah.
Just more freedom for him, and I'm just glad to see that maybe he gets like the true opportunity that he was supposed to get last year. Maybe he gets that this season, which I'm extremely excited for as a Raptor fan.
Mm.
But Jay, last loser, who do we got?
So the last loser, I'm gonna go with the team that we. I'm gonna go with the team that we both agreed on. I am gonna throw out just not necessarily a wild card, but like my honorable mention that I
Yeah,
just want to mention briefly. The team that me and TV agreed on is the Orlando Magic. The Orlando Magic, super confused on what the heck is going on with them. I'm
yeah,
not really sure what their progression is going to be. They picked up Joe Ingles and brought back Mo Wagner. Shout out to them for bringing the Wagner back. They've already got his brother Franz playing at a high level, and it wasn't like Mo was bad. He gave him some really good minutes at the center
yeah,
spot. Bring him back on a 2-year deal, cool. Not really sure what Joe Ingles does for this team. Doesn't fit the timeline. Maybe he gives them some 3-point shooting, some ball handling, but like they really needed a point guard. They really needed a veteran point guard. They needed a guy who would be steady hand. They needed somebody to kind of bring things together. And even in a weird way, I say they need the point guard, but their point guard position is pretty log jammed right now. They
yeah,
drafted Anthony back. They drafted Anthony Black. They already had Markel Fultz, who had a pretty big year last year. They still had Cole. They still have Cole Anthony
Jalen's.
and Jalen Suggs on this roster as well. So they have a log jam at the point guard position, but I don't think that anybody at that position right now really solves their problem at all.
Yeah,
So I don't necessarily know if they did anything besides move laterally in terms of what they were doing this offseason. So that makes me a little worried about what exactly their plan is, especially because what they did in the draft with going for what was it? They went for Anthony Black, as we mentioned
Jet
beforehand,
Howard.
and then Jet Howard as the other one. Who TV you threw out Grady Dick going to the Toronto Raptors. I for sure thought that Grady Dick was going to end up on Orlando just because I thought that he fit what they were looking to do a lot more, and instead them grabbing Jet Howard makes me a little confused about what it is that they're trying to do because I think yes they got a knockdown shooter, but I think they reached on the wrong shooter.
Yeah,
So it just makes you kind of wonder, like, okay, what exactly is brewing up in Orlando? Still TBD, and this is a team that's not necessarily going to be playing for like the postseason next year, I don't think. But they're a little bit confusing. My honorable mention before you go for Orlando is Philly. I don't know if we're gonna get into James Harden today, but Philly, all they did was brought in Patrick Beverly. This was a team that underachieved last year. All they did was bring in Patrick Beverly, and yet again they have another all-star player that doesn't want to play there. That's gonna be hard to trade,
yeah,
and that's gonna take up a ton of headlines for the rest of the offseason.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, talking about the Orlando Magic first. There's just a whole logjam there, and I think this feels like this the history of the Orlando Magic, especially over the last decade or so, moving laterally and not really progressing forward or backwards. I don't know what this Orlando Magic team. I felt like they needed some shooting, especially. So when Grady Dick fell to the Raptors, I was super surprised. I thought that he was a lock to go to at least one of the Orlando picks. Jet Howard, Anthony Black, talented players, but man, it just like kind of like fits holes what they already had already, especially with Anthony Black. I mean, Fultz is still there, like you mentioned, Anthony Suggs. What's going to happen there? A few of those guys, like there has to be at least one of those guys gone by next season because there's no way they're going to have all four guards in that rotation next year. What's going to happen with Jet Howard? Where is he going to fit into all this? Who knows? I just think that the Orlando Magic just a lot of questionable moves. And I think that's just something that we're just kind of used to with the Orlando Magic at this point. And I don't know. I mean, maybe they see something that we don't. Maybe they surprise a lot of people, but just like from like the standpoint that we are right now, I just feel like it was like really confusing. Back to the 76ers thing. Yeah, I mean, hopefully they can get. I mean, Christian Wood's still on the market. They need some scoring off the bench. Hopefully maybe he finds his way back to the 76ers. But the fact that they only have Patrick Beverly and they're probably going to lose James Harden, it's not looking good for the Philadelphia 76ers at the moment. I do want to throw in one honorable mention too. This I think like this is I think this is like another honorable mention for a loser. I'm gonna get your quick thoughts on this. Dear Miami Heat, you talked about the Denver Nuggets who were NBA finalists and they lost two key guys. I think the Heat lost even more important players when it comes to um, Gabe Vincent, and Max Strus, who ended up on the Cleveland Cavaliers. I mean, I don't know who they're going to replace him with. Is the Damian Lillard trade going to happen? Who knows? But man, those are some key pieces. Those are two starters that they lost.
I think you're definitely right, TV. I think the only thing is we got to see how this Damian Lillard thing plays out, because I think if we're just talking strictly Max Strus and Gabe Vincent, I think, or shoot, throw in Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson. I think we end up coming out of this where if they get Damian Lillard, I mean, they get the best guard out of the group, and it's not even close. They might get the best guard out of all of those four guys combined. So I think we're looking at a world where if they get Damian Lillard, there's a little bit of redemption there, because yeah, you let those guys walk, but you make a super big move in terms of getting Damian Lillard to replace that production.
Yeah.
And he fits like a glove for what they want to do.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that is kind of, I've seen something that's notable about a potential trade package that actually helps Portland kind of completely get out of cap hell, which is when they get Duncan Robinson, they get Duncan Robinson, they get Tyler Hero, they get Martin, and I think it's like one or two other pieces and draft capital. And Portland sends not only Damian Lillard, but they send Jeremy Grant too. I've even seen that kind of trade proposal thrown out there as well, which sounds blockbuster as a mug. And you send two very heavily paid guys over by giving Miami both Damian Lillard and Jeremy Grant. But like I said, this is why I said that Miami might not be a loser just yet, because if they're able to say they pull off a trade like that, you get Jimmy Butler, Damian Lillard, Jeremy Grant, Bam Adebayo, insert name here. I mean, they got Kevin Love, they've got Josh Richardson, they picked up Thomas Bryant in the offseason as well.
Yeah.
There's a world where they could still come out of this offseason with some pretty high hopes, even with the guys that walked out the door.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking from like a perspective right now. I mean,
definitely.
If this happens, or like where you just lose Gabe Vincent and Max Strus, that's kind of tough.
Yeah,
it's more of an incomplete, more than like a loser. It's more of an incomplete. We gotta wait to see what the Damian Lillard trade happens. But as of this right now, losing two starters on your finals rotation is looking tough, and I have to give them an honorable mention as a loser as well. But yeah, if we're missing any winners or losers of the free agency so far, let us know down below. If we're missing anyone, a player, like a franchise or whatever it is, let us know below what are some of your other winners and losers that we did not mention so far. We're kind of going a bit overtime, so we're actually gonna not talk about the James Harden topic and the quiz and the draft, because man, like we mentioned, there was a lot of stuff to get into, so we had to really like go content heavy on this, but. We think we can still get to a quiz, right, James? We can still like end this off with
man. So we'll knock out the quiz. We have a special draft. We might even we'll figure out how we'll structure next episode. Like we mentioned at the top of this episode, we knew there was going to be a ton to cover, and we wanted to try to get some of the bigger things out the way. Of course, the big trades, and of course, winners and losers is huge. We're going to do the quiz today. We'll probably get back to the draft next week, and don't you worry, we might not get into the James Harden stuff right now, but if we don't do it on this episode, first of all, we'll be one of the first people to be on it when he gets traded. That's for sure. But I think that we'll also maybe give our brief thoughts on it on TikTok. So check us out over there. TV, if they follow the TikTok, if they follow the TikTok, if they listen to the podcast religiously, we've been telling them for a while that July is when movies are made. This is when we were going to really start kicking down the doors, because free agency was going to be an uproar and things were going to start moving. Well, guess what? It's July now. Doors are about to get kicked down. Expect a lot of content, including James Harden being a topic of interest on our TikTok. So we're not going to get to that today, like you mentioned before, and we're going to hop into the quiz so we can go ahead and close things out. But yeah, man, that's what happens when you have an eventful start to the off season, bro. Definitely a hot start to this off season so far.
100%. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff we're gonna be missing out, but we're still gonna end it off with a nice little quiz. And Jay, for today's quiz, since we're talking about free agency, we're talking about a lot of money going around. I'm gonna ask you, as of this moment, in terms of guaranteed money, who are the top 10 highest paid players in the league right now in terms of guaranteed money? I'm going to put a preface on this. If we're going with like the maximum they can get, Tyrese Halliburton and Anthony Edwards would both be on this list. but those are still tentative. They still have to be like they have to meet certain criteria by the end of the contract to get the full deal. So in terms of guaranteed money, they just miss out on this list.
Hmm.
But in terms of the top 10 players who get paid, in terms of guaranteed money, I'm gonna need you to name these for me. Let's see if we can get all 10.
All right.
Let's see.
Steph,
Steph is number 5.
Braun,
Braun is number 9.
Paul George.
Paul George is not on this list. I think he's in the top 20 still. Yeah, he's still in the top 20.
Wow. Okay. Kind of a bargain, Loki.
Mm-hmm.
Giannis.
Giannis just outside the top 10. I think he's like number 11.
Wow. Weird flyer, Rudy.
Nope, he's on this list. I think he's like,
Okay, good. I mean, he's definitely overpaid, but I
yeah.
mean,
I mean, all these guys are.
Dame.
Dame is number 1.
Yeah, Dame. Bradley Beal.
He is number 8, I believe. I think he's number 8. Yeah, he's number 8.
Okay.
Or no, number 7. Number 7. Number 7.
Hmm,
So you got 8. So you got 8 in LeBron. You got 7 in Bradley Beal. You've got number 1 in what's it called?
Dame.
Lord, and you got number 5 in Steph.
I'm gonna go superstars first and then figure the rest out. Jimmy Butler.
Number 9. Number 9 on this list.
Okay,
40,
that's a
almost
good
50 mil a
one.
year. But worth it, 100%.
Alright.
Worth it.
Anthony Davis.
Anthony Davis is not on this list.
Okay, it's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
Um,
All these guys, multiple time All Stars. I think you go, yeah. All of these guys are multiple time All Stars for sure. Yeah.
Carl Anthony Towns.
Number 3. It's crazy how much.
Wow,
Number 3.
their team is insanely expensive.
Yeah.
Kevin Durant.
He sneaks in at number 10.
Wow, that's insane. Okay, wasn't expecting him to be that low. Okay, how many do I have out of the
So
10?
you're missing. So you have 10. You have 9. You have 8. You have 7. You have 5. You have number 3 and you have number 1. So you're missing number 2, 4, and I think it's 7. Yes, that's not 7. Number 6.
Now we gotta start thinking about paid folks. Okay, I'm gonna stick with superstars and then I'm gonna pick like random
Yeah.
guys that I think are just paid a lot. So we're gonna say Trae Young,
Nope. You're missing
Luka
some good.
Doncic.
Not yet. No, I think he's only on the rookie scale extension, so he's not like super.
Oh, that's right. Tobias Harris.
Nope. I mean, I'm gonna tell you right now, all these guys that you're missing are like some of the best in the league.
Oh, okay. Have I said Kawhi Leonard yet?
Nope.
He's not in there though.
I'm surprised you haven't got 2 of these guys because they have been in discussions for just over the past 3 years. They've been doing it out for the past 3 years.
Oh, so Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic?
Yep, Embiid is at number 6, Nikola Jokic at number 4. So you're just missing number 2.
Number 2 is high. Dang, once upon a time, this would have been Russ, right? Like
Once upon a time, 100.
Yeah.
This number 2, I don't know if this is gonna be giving it away too much, but bro,
Is it Ben Simmons?
No.
Oh, thank God it's not, because I was worried, bro. I'm not gonna lie to you. I was a little worried there.
Gosh, no, please no.
Oh.
I'm gonna tell you right now, this guy has multiple teammates on this list.
What the heck? Wait.
You're talking about people who are about to hit not just the second apron, the third apron. This is about to be nuts this coming season. Or like this, get their average salary.
Oh, what, like Klay Thompson?
No.
No, he can't be second.
No, he can't be second. You already named 2 of his teammates. I'm surprised you haven't got to this guy yet.
Man, not really sure because you said he has multiple teammates on you, but I've already said Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, Draymond just re-upped.
Oh my.
Oh man, it's probably somebody like super obvious too.
Some may say that he is the most. I think we had a conversation about him being the most important player on this team.
Jamal Murray?
Nope.
Okay, I remember that
That's
debate.
another West team. It's another West team. You gotta think about they've been in the news like a whole lot these past like 2 weeks.
Okay, wait a minute. I'm just gonna go to teams because
Yeah.
I can't cheat off teams, but I can at least get a better idea.
Yes.
Um, they've been in the news recently.
I mean they've made some big
Multiple
moves.
teammates on the list. They made big moves. What?
Bro, this guy is like probably the best at his position in the league.
Wait, what? He's like the. Wait a minute. What?
Yes. He is elite, bro. Come on.
You've already said so many people though. Jason Tatum?
No, he's in the
Wait.
West, bro. He's in the West.
Oh yeah, he's in the West. Wait, so we did Nikola Jokic. I said Luca. You said no. Not Kawhi. Not Anthony Davis.
You're gonna be hitting yourself when you realize
I'm gonna be sick. Is it Devin Booker?
it is Devin Booker,
Oh,
number
okay,
2.
I'm like, dude, this is starting to stress me out. I'm like, wait a minute. If I don't get this, it's gonna kill me.
It is Devin Booker, number 2. On
Oh
average,
no, because Bradley Beal's okay. You said he had multiple teammates on the list. Bradley Beal's on the list, and KD barely made
in
the.
the list, yeah.
Got you, got you,
So
got
you got the. I mean, Anthony Edwards and Tyrese would both have been on the list if they like were guaranteed their full contract in terms of like average money they make per year, but they're not. They don't qualify for the list. Devin Booker's making almost 60 million a year on his contract, almost 60 million a year, which is crazy. But yeah, that is the quiz for today. Let us know down below if you have any other quizzes or any other draft ideas that you can have for future episodes. But that I think for free agency and the money that's been throwing around, I think it was pretty fair to have this. I think
Man, that was nuts though. I can't be, dude. Oh man, I'm gonna be kicking myself the rest of the day for missing on D Book on that one. Yeah, that boy's paid.
yeah, he's the highest paid player on the Suns, and rightfully so. To be fair, I think he's been there the longest, 100%. So rightfully so. Devin Booker is number 2 on this list. Again, let us know down below if you have any other quizzes that you want us to do down the line. But back in July, NBA offseason, we are back with the podcast. It was another fantastic episode. Jay, before we sign off, what do you have to tell these beautiful people?
Dude, we said every podcast, but look, the reality is July is here. All season is fully kicking. We've got summer league now. Content's coming. Content is coming. TikTok hitting it. Podcast, we're gonna get back to being consistent in terms of every single week. We're covering the biggest topics in the NBA. Doesn't matter if we're not playing any games, man. There's always something to talk about when it comes to the league. And when the news cycle does get slow, watch out for that too, because me and TV got a couple of ideas in the chamber as well.
Yeah, it's gonna be an absolutely fantastic summer in terms of content, and of course, if you have to find that, you have to find that on the Hit Your Free Throws page, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all the podcast networks, all the good stuff. Just continue to show your support. We really do appreciate y'all. But yeah, this is another end of another fantastic episode. Thank you guys for watching or listening. Hope you have a fantastic day. That's TV. This is TV signing out. That's Jay over there. Have a fantastic day, everyone. Take it easy. Peace.
Peace.